The docking bay of Intergalactic Academy X-318 was a cacophony of mechanical hums and distant alien voices. Towers of shimmering energy coiled upward into the atmosphere, casting pulsating blue light over the vast metallic platform. Marcus Cain stepped off the transport ship, his boots clicking against the polished deck, as the eyes of alien students, some with multiple sets, others glowing faintly, turned toward him. Their stares carried curiosity, suspicion, and a trace of disdain. He felt the weight of their judgment but kept his head high, his dark hair catching the artificial light as he surveyed the scene. The air was heavy with a faint metallic tang, mingled with an unfamiliar floral scent. Marcus tightened his grip on the strap of his bag, deliberately slowing his breathing. He'd faced battlefields with worse odds, but none had felt this personal. Standing here in a sea of alien superiority, he was stripped of his rank, his reputation, his human fleet insignia. For now he was just Marcus Cain, Earth Cadet. Marcus Cain, an automated voice intoned, its tone clipped and mechanical. A holographic figure materialized before him, its translucent form humming softly. "You are late for orientation. Follow the lighted path." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. He followed the glowing trail that snaked through the docking bay and into the Academy's sprawling interior. The corridor walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent energy, and alien students brushed past him without acknowledgement, their forms varying from towering insectoid beings to amorphous, gelatinous blobs. "Earthling," one voice muttered, the sneer unmistakable even without the aid of his translator. Marcus clenched his fist but kept moving. Let them think what they want. That's the point, isn't it? The classroom loomed ahead, its towering entrance glinting under the shifting light. As Marcus stepped inside, the murmur of alien voices subsided, replaced by a suffocating silence. Rows of tiered seating spiraled upward in a grand amphitheater, and at the center of it all stood the professor, a crystalline figure refracting the light into dazzling patterns that danced across the room. "Class," the professor's melodic voice resonated, "please acknowledge Marcus Cain, our newest cadet from Earth." The name hung in the air, drawing a ripple of murmurs and muted laughter. Marcus straightened his shoulders, his sharp blue eyes scanning the crowd. The seating was filled with alien students, some with elongated limbs, others with translucent skin or metallic exoskeletons, all of them watching him with expressions ranging from bemused curiosity to outright contempt. "Earth!" someone snorted. "Are they still throwing rocks to hunt prey?" Marcus didn't flinch. He walked to his seat with measured steps, passing a cluster of students who whispered in clicks and chirps as he moved past. His assigned seat was next to a tall, violet-skinned alien whose golden eyes followed him with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Welcome to the Academy," the alien said, his voice smooth and sharp as a blade. "I'm Lyrian, Prince of Keltharian. You must feel terribly out of place here." Marcus met his gaze evenly. "I'll adapt," Lyrian smirked, leaning back in his chair. "We'll see." The professor launched into the lesson, their crystalline body shifting hues with each point they made. Marcus focused on the projections, floating in midair, holographic diagrams of starship maneuvers and energy weapon schematics. But as the lecture turned to Earth's technological limitations, the tone shifted. "Primitive species often struggle with energy efficiency," the professor intoned. "For example, Earth's reliance on fission-based power is an outdated model even by pre-galactic standards." The room filled with faint snickers. Marcus remained silent, his expression unreadable. He jotted notes in a plain notebook, his movements deliberate as he ignored the subtle prodding glances from Lyrian and others. "Not yet," he thought, forcing his hand to stay steady. "Let them think I'm nobody." As the lecture concluded, Marcus gathered his belongings, waiting for the others to file out before leaving. The corridor was quieter now, the crowd thinning as students dispersed to their next classes. He adjusted his earpiece and activated his neural interface, his eyes scanning the encrypted text that materialized before him. Day 1 report. Alien attitudes. Dismissive. Overconfident. Curriculum. Biased against human capability. Exaggerated assumptions. Immediate risk. Minimal. Continue observation. Marcus deactivated the interface with a quick tap and exhaled. The Academy's grandeur was undeniable, but beneath its polished exterior, cracks were already beginning to show, and he'd exploit every single one of them. Let them underestimate me, he thought, his lips curving into a faint, humorless smile as he strode down the corridor. That's when they'll make their first mistake. Marcus Cain leaned against the cool metal of the Academy's hallway wall, letting the faint hum of bioluminescent energy calm his nerves. The laughter and whispers from the earlier lecture still echoed in his ears, but his expression remained composed. He had endured far worse than alien sneers on battlefields where lives hung in the balance. The corridor was alive with motion, alien students brushing past him in waves of color and sound. Their footsteps were varied, soft clicks, metallic clinks, and the almost imperceptible swish of hovering forms. The air was thick with a blend of metallic tang and the faintly sweet aroma of some exotic plant life cultivated in the Academy's biomes. Marcus adjusted his grip on the strap of his pack, scanning the environment with a soldier's precision. Ahead, the doors to the Academy's training arena slid open with a mechanical hiss. A rush of warm air, tinged with ozone, washed over him as he stepped inside. The arena was a sprawling expanse divided into various combat zones: simulated zero-gravity chambers, holographic skirmish pits, and melee combat rings equipped with hybrid weaponry. Energy bolts streaked through the air, illuminating the metallic walls with bursts of vivid light. The smell of scorched metal and faint ionization clung to the air. Marcus's arrival barely registered with the students scattered across the arena. Most were engrossed in their exercises, their alien forms moving with practiced ease. But he could feel the weight of subtle glances, hear the whispered remarks as he made his way to the designated group. "You're late, Earthling," a familiar voice called out. Marcus turned to find Lyrian standing at the center of their group, his arms crossed and his expression a mix of amusement and superiority. The prince's golden eyes glinted under the arena's shifting lights. "Wanted to make an entrance," Marcus replied evenly, dropping his pack to the ground. Lyrian's smirk widened. "Just try not to embarrass yourself. This is real training, not some primitive rock-throwing contest." Marcus said nothing, his gaze sweeping the rest of the group. There were 6 of them in total, including a glowing, wiry alien whose pulsing bioluminescent lines seemed to flicker with uncertainty. The name from the roster surfaced in Marcus's mind: Crix. He filed the observation away, sensing that Crix's uncertainty could prove useful. The instructor arrived, their towering insectoid form silhouetted against the arena's glowing walls. Their voice was a low hum, resonant and commanding. "Today's exercise is a tactical skirmish simulation. You will be divided into teams and tasked with securing an energy core while neutralizing enemy threats. Adapt or fail." The teams were assigned quickly. Lyrian's commanding tone ensured he took point, assigning himself the most aggressive role. Marcus and Crix were placed in the rear guard, a position that all but ensured they'd see little action. "Just keep up," Lyrian said dismissively, before leading the others toward the first objective. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he let the prince's arrogance slide. He turned to Crix, whose glowing lines pulsed nervously. "Stay close to cover," Marcus instructed, his voice calm but firm. "And keep an eye on their flanks. These simulations are designed to exploit overconfidence." Crix blinked, their large eyes flickering with faint surprise. You've done this before, haven't you?" "Let's just say I've seen a few battles," Marcus replied, his tone nonchalant. The simulation began with an ear-splitting klaxon. The arena's polished floors morphed into uneven terrain, walls rising from the ground to form a labyrinth of jagged metal and glowing barriers. The temperature seemed to rise, and the faint scent of scorched circuitry intensified. Marcus and Crix moved cautiously through the maze, the distant sound of plasma fire and shouted commands reverberating through the space. Marcus's senses sharpened, his military training kicking in as he noted the subtle patterns in the simulation's design. The enemy drones moved with precision, herding Lyrian's team into a bottleneck. "They're being boxed in," Marcus muttered. Crix glanced at him, their glowing lines dimming slightly. "Should we warn them?" Marcus shook his head. Not yet. Let them overextend. We'll strike when the enemy's distracted. Crix hesitated but followed his lead. They moved to higher ground, crouching behind a jagged outcrop that overlooked the battlefield. From their vantage point, Marcus could see the enemy's movements clearly. The drones were focusing their fire on Lyrian's group, forcing them into cover. Stay here and disrupt their targeting systems, Marcus instructed. I'll draw their attention. Crix's glowing lines pulsed with hesitation. Are you sure? You'll be outnumbered. Marcus offered a faint smile. It's not about numbers. It's about positioning. Before Crix could respond, Marcus vaulted over the outcrop, landing with practiced ease. His movements were fluid, calculated as he approached the drones from an unexpected angle. The hum of their energy weapons grew louder, but Marcus moved faster. His plasma blade ignited with a sharp hiss, its blue light cutting through the dim chaos. The first drone fell in a burst of sparks, its circuitry crackling as it collapsed. The others shifted their focus, their fire concentrated on Marcus. He ducked and weaved, using the terrain to his advantage as he drew the enemy away from Lyrian's group. Crix's energy field activated with a bright pulse, disrupting the drone's targeting systems. Their fire became erratic, bolts of energy streaking harmlessly into the air. Marcus seized the opportunity, dismantling the remaining drones with precision strikes. By the time the exercise ended, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The jagged terrain dissolved back into polished floors, and the hum of the simulation's machinery faded. Marcus stood amidst the remnants of the drones, his blade deactivating with a faint hiss. The instructor's voice broke the silence. Simulation complete. Tactical success achieved by Cadet Cain and Cadet Crix. The announcement sent a ripple of murmurs through the group. Lyrian's expression was a mix of disbelief and barely concealed irritation. "You undermined my strategy," Lyrian accused, his tone sharp. Marcus met his glare with calm indifference. "Your strategy was flawed." Before Lyrian could respond, the instructor stepped forward. "Cadet Cain demonstrated exceptional adaptability and command awareness. Let this be a lesson. Overconfidence is the enemy of success." Crix approached Marcus, their glowing lines pulsing brightly. "That was incredible," they said, their voice crackling with awe. "You saw everything before it happened." "Experience helps," Marcus replied, his tone modest. As the group dispersed, Marcus caught Lyrian's glare from across the room. The prince's golden eyes burned with resentment, but Marcus's gaze remained steady. He had made his first move, and the pieces were falling into place. The Academy's corridors buzzed with an electric tension as Marcus Cain walked with deliberate steps toward his next class. The earlier simulation victory replayed in his mind like a chess match, every move dissected for meaning. Around him, alien students whispered in clusters, their conversations crackling like static in his earpiece. He caught fragments through his neural implant, references to the Earthling who had turned a routine exercise into a strategic masterclass. Marcus's senses were on high alert. The faint hum of the energy systems lining the walls seemed louder, the distant footfalls of alien students sharper. The sterile metallic tang in the air was punctuated by a floral undertone, like a faint mockery of normalcy. He adjusted his pack and entered the Academy's central hub, its vast dome glowing faintly with holographic readouts of galactic star systems. The visuals hung like constellations, shifting as students and staff interacted with them. "Earthling!" came a voice, smooth and sharp. Marcus turned to find Lyrian stepping out from the shadows, his golden eyes narrowed, his arms crossed over his chest. The prince's regal posture contrasted sharply with the irritation in his tone. "You've been busy," Lyrian said, his voice low. Marcus kept his expression neutral, just trying to keep up. Lyrian stepped closer, his violet skin catching the glow of a nearby display. "You think one lucky simulation makes you more than a novelty? Don't mistake indulgence for respect." Marcus allowed a faint smile to curl at the edges of his lips. "Indulgence isn't why I'm here." Lyrian's gaze hardened, but before he could respond, an alert blared through the dome. The sound was low and resonant, sending ripples of unease through the gathered students. Holographic projections shifted to red, displaying urgent warnings in a dozen alien languages. Marcus's implant translated instantly, Unauthorized vessel approaching. Initiating lockdown. The dome's light dimmed as barriers activated, shimmering with faint blue energy. Students scattered, their movements hurried and chaotic. Marcus's heart rate spiked, but his face remained calm as his neural implant pinged with a message from command. Alert. Potential hostile forces inbound. Objective. Secure Academy personnel. Evaluate threat and neutralize as necessary. Marcus turned back to Lyrian. This isn't a drill. Are you ready to lead? For a moment, Lyrian hesitated, his confidence faltering. Then he squared his shoulders. Always. The two moved swiftly, weaving through the panicked crowd toward the training arena, where many students had already gathered. The air there was heavy with tension, the smell of ozone mingling with the faint, acrid tang of fear. Crix was among them, their glowing lines pulsing erratically. "What's happening?" Crix asked, their voice crackling with nervous energy. "Unconfirmed threat," Marcus replied. "We're going to secure the main spire." "The spire?" Crix's glowing lines flickered. "That's where the neural AI core is." Marcus nodded. "And it's what they're after." Lyrian frowned. "How can you be so sure?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to the assembled students. "Listen up," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of fear. "We need to divide into two groups. One will reinforce the western corridors and keep the main entry point secure. The other will follow me to the spire. This is not a negotiation. Move." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, as if compelled by the authority in his tone, the students began to act. Crix stepped closer, their glow steadying. "I'm with you." Lyrian sighed, his pride visibly bruised. "As am I." Marcus led the group through the labyrinthine corridors, his senses alive to every sound and shift in the air. The faint vibration of the lockdown barriers was a constant reminder of the stakes. As they neared the spire, the smell of scorched metal intensified and distant explosions echoed through the halls. "Contact," Marcus muttered, his neural implant highlighting enemy signatures ahead. The corridor ahead flickered with the glow of energy weapons. Alien mercenaries in black armor advanced with precision, their movements methodical. Marcus crouched behind a barrier, gesturing for the others to do the same. "They're professionals," he whispered. "Crix, disrupt their targeting systems. Lyrian, take the left flank and draw their fire. I'll handle the center." Lyrian scowled but nodded. Crix's glowing lines brightened as they focused, sending a pulse of energy that caused the mercenaries' weapons to spark and misfire. Marcus moved swiftly, his plasma blade igniting with a hiss. He was on the enemy before they could recover, his strikes precise and unrelenting. The air filled with the sharp scent of burning circuits and the metallic clang of collapsing armor. Lyrian provided covering fire, his movements surprisingly effective. Crix's field kept the mercenaries disoriented, allowing Marcus to dismantle their formation with brutal efficiency. By the time the last mercenary fell, the corridor was silent except for the faint hum of the spire's systems. "Clear," Marcus said, deactivating his blade. The group moved into the spire's control room, its walls alive with shifting holograms and glowing conduits. Marcus approached the main console, his fingers flying over the controls as he accessed the AI's defensive protocols. "They'll send reinforcements," Lyrian said, his voice tight. "Let them," Marcus replied. "We'll be ready." As the room's systems came online, Marcus felt a flicker of unease. This wasn't just a raid, it was a test, and whoever was orchestrating it was watching closely. "What aren't you telling us?" Lyrian asked, his golden eyes narrowing. Marcus glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "We're not the only ones being tested." Before Lyrian could press further, the console lit up with an incoming alert. A new wave of signatures appeared on the holographic display, their approach rapid and deliberate. "Here they come," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Positions. This isn't over." The air grew heavier, the hum of the spire's systems rising to a deafening crescendo. As Marcus gripped his blade, his mind raced with strategies. The real battle was just beginning, and he intended to show them all exactly what a human was capable of. The first wave hit with brutal precision, the mercenaries advancing through the Academy's labyrinthine corridors with a relentless efficiency that sent ripples of unease through Marcus Cain's team. The air was alive with the whine of energy weapons, each discharge illuminating the metallic walls in sharp bursts of light. The acrid smell of burning circuitry and seared metal hung heavy, clawing at Marcus's throat as he crouched behind a barrier with Crix and Lyrian. "West flank's buckling," Crix reported, their glowing lines pulsing frenetically as they scanned the holographic map on their wrist interface. "They're pushing hard through the maintenance access." "Then they'll expect us to reinforce it," Marcus replied, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We're going to make them regret that assumption." Lyrian raised an eyebrow, his plasma rifle cradled in his hands. "You have a plan? Or is this another one of your improvisations?" Marcus offered him a fleeting smirk. "A little of both." He gestured to the holographic display projected from Crix's wrist. "Crix, reroute auxiliary power to the southern corridor's lighting system. Flood it with as much interference as you can manage. Lyrian, take your team and hold their attention on the west flank. Force them to overcommit." Lyrian's golden eyes narrowed. "And you?" "I'll be waiting for them in the south," Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "When they break formation, we'll box them in and neutralize the threat." The prince hesitated, then nodded. "Try not to get yourself killed. I'd hate to have to explain it to the council." Marcus's grin was brief but genuine. "You'll miss me more than you think." As Lyrian and his team moved out, Marcus turned to Crix, who was already working on the interference protocols. The glow of their bioluminescent lines reflected off the console, their movements quick but steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "You ready?" Marcus asked. Crix nodded, their voice crackling with determination. "Let's do this." The southern corridor was a dimly lit expanse of sharp angles and shadowed alcoves, its silence broken only by the faint hum of the energy conduits running along the walls. Marcus moved with deliberate care, his plasma blade igniting with a soft hiss as he pressed his back against the cool metal of a support column. His senses sharpened, every flicker of movement and distant sound feeding into his neural implant's tactical analysis. Then they came. The mercenaries moved in a tight formation, their black armor glinting faintly in the dim light. They advanced with practiced precision, their weapons sweeping the corridor as they searched for threats. Marcus waited, his heartbeat steady, until the first of them stepped into the illuminated section of the hallway. He struck with calculated speed, his blade cutting through the air with a hiss that was almost lost beneath the mercenaries' startled cry. The enemy collapsed, their weapon clattering to the ground as Marcus ducked back into the shadows. The remaining mercenaries reacted instantly, their fire lancing through the air in blinding streaks of blue and white. The sharp scent of ionized air filled Marcus's lungs as he moved, his blade deflecting a burst of energy that ricocheted off the wall behind him. "South corridor compromised," one of the mercenaries barked, their voice distorted by their helmet's modulation. "Requesting backup." Marcus grinned. "Exactly what I wanted." A sudden burst of light flooded the corridor as Crix's interference protocols activated, the overcharged lighting system casting harsh, disorienting glares that reflected off the mercenaries' visors. Marcus moved with practiced precision, his blade carving through their ranks as their formation faltered. "South corridor now," Marcus barked into his comm. Lyrian's team surged into the southern corridor, their combined firepower cutting off the mercenaries' retreat. Trapped between Marcus and Lyrian, the remaining enemies fell swiftly, their precision replaced by desperation as the tide of the battle turned against them. When the last mercenary collapsed, the corridor fell silent, save for the hum of the energy conduits and the distant echoes of battle elsewhere in the academy. Marcus deactivated his blade, the faint glow fading as he surveyed the scene. Lyrian approached, his plasma rifle still raised but his expression grudgingly impressed. "I'll admit," the prince said, his tone clipped, "that was effective." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "High praise coming from you." Crix joined them, their glowing lines dim but steady. "We've got incoming signals," they said, their voice tinged with exhaustion. "Larger group this time. Looks like they're regrouping for a final push." Marcus nodded, his mind already racing through possibilities. "Then we push back harder." The group moved swiftly toward the main spire, the air growing heavier with each step as the distant sounds of explosions grew louder. The spire loomed ahead, its towering structure pulsing with light as the Academy's neural AI systems worked to maintain control. The room beyond was a chaotic swirl of holographic displays and emergency alerts, the air thick with the acrid tang of overheating circuitry. "They'll target the spire directly," Marcus said, his voice steady. "We hold this ground no matter what." Lyrian's golden eyes flashed with determination. "Agreed. What's the plan?" Marcus gestured to the room's layout, his voice quick and precise. "Crix, amplify the spire's energy field and tie it into the defensive grid. It'll overload their systems if they get too close. Lyrian, you take the upper platform and cover the entrances. I'll anchor the ground team." The prince nodded. "Understood." The next wave hit harder, their coordinated assault shaking the spire to its core. Marcus fought with relentless focus, his blade flashing through the dim light as he countered every strike. Lyrian's precision fire picked off enemies before they could breach the upper platform, while Crix's enhanced energy field sent bursts of disruptive force through the enemy ranks. As the battle raged on, Marcus could feel the tide beginning to turn. The mercenaries' movements grew erratic, their precision unraveling under the relentless pressure. When the final enemy fell, the room was eerily quiet, save for the labored breathing of the defenders and the faint hum of the spire's systems. Marcus deactivated his blade, his chest rising and falling as he surveyed the aftermath. The spire still stood, its light steady and unwavering. Around him, his team regrouped, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "We did it," Crix said, their voice cracking with relief. Lyrian nodded, his usual arrogance tempered by genuine respect. "We held the line, together." Marcus allowed himself a small, weary smile. "And we're just getting started." As the team began fortifying their position, Marcus's neural implant pinged with an incoming message. His smile faded as he read the encrypted text. "Mission update. Enemy reinforcements detected. High-value target confirmed. Prepare for escalation." Marcus's grip tightened on his blade. The real fight was yet to come, and he intended to meet it head-on. The tremors of the next assault rippled through the spire, vibrating in Marcus Cain's bones as he stood at the center of his team's defenses. The dim lights flickered under the strain of the energy pulses radiating from the enemy's weapons. The air was thick with tension, and the faint hum of the spire's neural AI filled the silence between explosions. Marcus inhaled deeply, his grip tightening on the hilt of his plasma blade. "Reinforcements are breaching the eastern corridor," Crix reported, their glowing lines pulsing erratically as they monitored the holographic map projected from the spire's control terminal. Lyrian paced near the upper platform, his golden eyes sharp and unyielding. "They're coordinating their firepower," he said grimly. "They'll collapse this structure if we don't stop them." Marcus's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Then we stop them. Crix, redirect the power grid to overload the eastern defense nodes. Lyrian, hold the upper platform. If they breach there, we lose the spire." The prince glanced at Marcus, his jaw tightening before he nodded. "Consider it done." Crix hesitated, their bioluminescence dimming slightly. "Redirecting the power grid means the southern defenses will fail. Are you sure?" Marcus met their gaze, his voice calm but resolute. "Trust me." The tension in the room was palpable as Crix worked quickly, their movements precise despite the chaos. The hum of the spire's systems surged as the redirected power cascaded into the eastern nodes. Marcus moved to the lower levels, his blade igniting with a sharp hiss as the first wave of reinforcements broke through. The mercenaries were relentless, their black armor glinting under the erratic glow of the spire's lights. Marcus ducked under a volley of plasma fire, his blade slicing through the air with lethal precision. The sharp scent of ozone filled his lungs as the mercenary before him fell, their weapon clattering to the ground. "Hold the line!" Marcus shouted, his voice carrying over the chaos. The students and staff who had remained in the spire rallied behind him, their makeshift defenses bolstered by his commanding presence. Lyrian's precision fire from above picked off enemies attempting to flank, while Crix's disruptions sent bursts of energy rippling through the enemy ranks. The room felt alive with the clash of battle. Every sound heightened. The crackle of energy fields, the sharp cries of combatants, the metallic clang of weapons meeting armor. Marcus fought with a singular focus, his movements calculated and deliberate. Each strike of his blade was a decisive blow, carving a path through the relentless waves of mercenaries. Above, Lyrian shouted through the comms, "They're redirecting forces to the west. We'll be overrun if we don't." "Hold the line!" Marcus shouted, his voice carrying over the chaos. The students and staff who had remained in the spire rallied behind him, their makeshift defenses bolstered by his commanding presence. Lyrian's precision fire from above picked off enemies attempting to flank, while Crix's disruption sent bursts of energy rippling through the enemy ranks. The room felt alive with the clash of battle, every sound heightened, the crackle of energy fields, the sharp cries of combatants, the metallic clang of weapons meeting armor. Marcus fought with a singular focus, his movements calculated and deliberate. Each strike of his blade was a decisive blow, carving a path through the relentless waves of mercenaries. Above, Lyrian shouted through the comms, "They're redirecting forces to the west. We'll be overrun if we don't—" "We can't let them take it," Marcus growled, his mind racing. "Crix, disable the spire's access points. Lyrian, meet me at the core." Without waiting for confirmation, Marcus sprinted toward the central chamber, his boots pounding against the scorched metal floor. The air grew hotter, the oppressive heat of the overloaded systems pressing against his skin. The core chamber loomed ahead, its pulsing blue light illuminating the shattered remains of the outer defenses. Inside, the enemy had already breached. A squad of mercenaries surrounded the neural AI, their weapons trained on the pulsating core. Marcus didn't hesitate. He launched himself into the fray, his blade igniting in a brilliant arc of blue light. The closest mercenary fell before they could react, their armor collapsing under the precision of his strike. "Lyrian, now!" Marcus shouted. From above, the prince descended with calculated precision, his plasma rifle unleashing a torrent of fire that forced the mercenaries to scatter. Marcus pressed the advantage, his blade a blur as he dismantled their formation. The air was thick with the sharp tang of burning circuitry, the sounds of battle echoing through the chamber. As the last mercenary fell, Marcus turned to the core. Its light flickered, the strain of the attack evident in its uneven pulse. Crix's voice crackled through the comms. "The core's destabilizing. We have to shut it down before it overloads." Marcus's hands flew over the control panel, his neural implant interfacing with the system as he worked to stabilize the core. The interface pulsed with error messages, each one more urgent than the last. "Come on," Marcus muttered, his fingers moving with practiced precision. The core's pulse steadied, its light stabilizing as the system rebalanced. "We're secure," he said finally, his voice heavy with relief. He turned to Lyrian, who was leaning against a console, his expression a mix of exhaustion and respect. "That was reckless," the prince said, but there was no malice in his tone. "But effective." Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. "High praise coming from you." The chamber fell quiet as the team regrouped, their breathing heavy but steady. The distant sounds of retreating mercenaries signaled the end of the assault. Marcus deactivated his blade, the faint hum fading into silence as he surveyed the aftermath. "We held the line," Crix said softly, their glowing lines dim but steady. Marcus nodded, his gaze steady. "We did more than that. We proved them wrong." As dawn broke over the academy, its light cutting through the smoke-filled air, Marcus stood on the raised platform overlooking the remnants of the battle. Students and staff gathered below, their faces a mix of exhaustion and awe as they looked to him. "Today, we faced what they thought would break us," Marcus said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "But we held together, we adapted, we overcame, and we proved that humanity isn't a weakness, it's a strength." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices rising like a wave. Marcus's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the faint outline of retreating ships disappeared into the distance. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Still, for the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt the weight of their underestimation lifting. They'll think twice before underestimating us again, Marcus muttered, a determined smile tugging at the corners of his lips. The galaxy had learned a lesson it wouldn't soon forget. Never mistake humanity's resolve for weakness.